as you know, a faction of the militant group Boko Haram has claimed responsibility for the slaughter of more than 70 farm workers in northeast Nigeria last Saturday. It's an attack that's been described as callous and cold-blooded, one of the most devastating this year, with dozens of civilians knifed to death or beheaded. Over the years, there have been many such attacks, with at least 30,000 thought to have been killed by the conflict over the last decade. So far, the Nigerian army has failed to contain the insurgency, and as the situation becomes more desperate, there are growing calls, not least from the governor of Borno State, as well as other northeast governors and the Senate, for the Buhari government to consider bringing in mercenaries with their own specialized equipment to tackle the insurgents. The use of mercenaries accounted for the success of the Jonathan administration in retaking territory from Boko Haram in 2015. And the argument is being made that if Nigeria needs quick results in the northeast, then its best bet is to use mercenaries.
Impress on the federal government to aggressively explore multilateral and bilateral options of partnership with the neighboring nations of Chad, Niger, and Cameroon towards reviving and strengthening the multinational joint task force and finding a lasting solution to the scourge of insurgency in the Lake Chad region. 5. Impress on the government to, as a matter of urgency, recruit at least 10,000 civilian JTF, versatile with the local terrain in Borno as agro rangers under the aegis of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps to complement the efforts of the Nigerian armed forces.
Well, for more on the suggestion of using mercenaries in Nigeria's restive northeast, I'm joined now in the studio by the security analyst and retired U.S. Army officer, Captain Bish Johnson. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Now, compared with Nigerian soldiers who are said to be demoralized, under-equipped, underpaid, mercenaries are said to be disciplined, combat-proven soldiers who can provide quick results. Do you agree with that assessment?
Sure. Mercenaries, you just alluded to the fact that when you were doing your preamble, that they were responsible for the successes that we had in this country during the last administration in retaking some of the territories that were taken over by Boko Haram. Most of these mercenaries are former military personnel who have retired, who have lots of experience, who are now in the private security sector. And so bringing them into this fight is bringing a whole bunch of assets and resources to take down this insurgency.
And of course, somebody like yourself, I mean, you fought in Iraq, didn't you?
Sure, I'm a war veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan, so that comes with lots of experience. And there are so many other Nigerians. The mercenaries don't necessarily have to come from outside Nigeria. There are tens of thousands of retired military personnel in this country that we have neglected over the years, that we can, resolve to tap into the huge knowledge and experience that they gained over the years of their service. And so bringing them on board and getting them organized and bringing them into the fight, because most of them are retired, but they're not tired. They can still offer advice to those who are still in the service.
But I mean, given your own military experience, which is considerable, you got an honorable discharge from the American Army. Do you think mercenaries who are used to conventional warfare, because I mean, that's what you're used to, will be effective against an enemy that fights asymmetrically and subsequently disappears into the countryside or melts away into urban slums?
Well, you know that what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, and which is still happening, is not more of a conventional warfare. It's still the same asymmetric warfare.
Well, that's the point. The key point you made there is
correct.
That it's still happening.
It's still happening, correct. And even the mercenaries that were in Nigeria faced the same challenge they faced in the same challenge we're facing today is the same challenge they faced in 2015, but somehow they were able to be effective. Look, the key to tackling insurgency is intelligence. And some of these mercenaries have vast knowledge in military intelligence. And so if we can tap into that experience, get their services, and have them advise us in gathering intelligence.
So like technical advisors?
The technical advisors, mostly, consultancy, technical advisors. Some of them may not be in direct combat actions, But if we can get them in those positions, it will allow our soldiers to be freed from other minor jobs that they're doing that is not related to combat, and they will be able to have more boots on the ground by bringing those soldiers into the battlefield. And let me make this point also. Nigerian army is stretched far thin. And I don't know if you know that Nigeria has less than 200,000 soldiers. Not all of these soldiers are combat armed soldiers. Some of them are in support services, and they're spread all over the 36 states of the Federation, doing one form of internal security or not. I think that time has come when we have to sit down and comprehensively look at all the assets and resources that we have in this country, be them the police, the army, the navy, the air force, the civil defense, and begin to prioritize their use. Right now, we are not prioritizing their use. You have soldiers marking checkpoints in areas that are relatively peaceful, when we need more boots on the ground in a state as large and huge as Borno State. So we need to do all of that stuff. There's no one silver bullet, that will solve the problem. But sitting together and looking at the whole problem comprehensively will be able to help us prioritize our assets and be able to effectively utilize those assets to deal with the current challenge that we have in the Northeast.
But the argument is always made that beyond Nigeria, asymmetric warfare is a challenge for everybody.
Sure.
I mean, I remember as a BBC correspondent going to Northern Ireland and reporting from there. And I mean, it was a challenge that went on for decades before eventually they resolved it through negotiation. So it's not just a military solution, is it?
No, it's not just military solution. I think what is happening in Nigeria is that we are heaping the whole blame on the military, particularly the army, and the army itself is overstretched, and they don't even have enough manpower. And you're talking about vast area as huge as Borno State. It's not just military solution. You need economic and political solution.
Yeah.
And the political solution, quite frankly, is even more important than the military solution.
Because that is obviously long term.
Of course. You can't kill your way out of this problem. At some point, there has to be some negotiated political solution to the problem. And so it's not just about the army. The army can do all they can do. But until you have our political leaders, someone of the political will, and get involved in this insurgency, we will continue to go through this circle. And let me remind you, there was a research that was done by Rand Corporation of America, which said that, look, it takes on average 20 years to be able to dismantle an insurgency like the one we have in
Well, we're in the
Nigeria.
second decade now,
So we're
approaching the 20-year mark.
Well, we hope we don't get to that 20 years, because that
Right.
would be very devastating for this country.
And I mean, the point really that you're making, which I think is a very important one, is the fact that, yes, for the long term and the medium term, you need political and economic solutions. But in the short term, I mean, these mercenaries are not going to be around permanently.
Sure.
So it's not going to be a long-term fix. Just a short burst to help return the advantage to the Nigerian army, something that generally happens in wars all over the world. Because even in Iraq, the US Army used mercenaries and stuff.
Sure. Now, let me be clear on this. Both the political, economic, and the military solutions have to go simultaneously. But yeah, to your point, look, the army can't do this alone. Nobody does it alone. Not even the United States did it alone. The United States, as you are aware, had a coalition of what the former President George W. Bush called coalition of the willing, where they had their allied countries of Britain, Australia, Canada, helping,
as well as private firms.
Sure, as well as Blackwater Security.
Absolutely.
Blackwater Security was there in the early days of the war, helping to escort private contractors that were building infrastructures, and that is the economic part of it. So escorting them in their convoys and giving them protections so that U.S. soldiers do not have to do that.
Yeah.
Because if they didn't have to do that, you have more boots on the ground for combat.
Which is what is happening in Nigeria. People guarding checkpoints.
Sure, which they're using military to guide checkpoints, when we can use the police or civil defense to guide these checkpoints and make more soldiers available for combat in the battlefield.
I'll tell you what, do stay with us, because what you're telling us is so interesting. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the suggested use of mercenaries in Nigeria's restive northeast. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniekolo. Now, a wealth of media reports, witness accounts and admissions by former members of the Jonathan administration suggest that white mercenaries, many of them from South Africa and former Soviet Union countries, helped to turn the tide against Boko Haram in 2015, allowing Nigeria to hold a relatively peaceful election. It was, of course, that election that brought President Buhari to power. These paid special forces, many of them frontline combatants and technical advisors, are people who pursue private wars for profit because, as one analyst put it, war is the only skill they have. Apart from Nigeria in 2015, such private military contractors have gone into battle in Angola, Sierra Leone, Iraq and Afghanistan with considerable success. They're said to be highly professional, skilled and battle-hardened. So are these the people that Nigeria needs to get the job done in the Northeast? And with me in the studio, the security analyst and retired U.S. Army officer, Captain Bish Johnson. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
Now, obviously, we've made the point about having mercenaries, but opponents of the idea have argued that the use of mercenaries could encourage militants from elsewhere in the Sahel and other parts of Africa and the Middle East to rally to Boko Haram's side. So in a sense, the presence of mercenaries could further internationalize the conflict, couldn't it?
Well, the situation is already internationalized. As you are aware, even as we are fighting on this side of the country, you still have Boko Haram in Niger and Chad. So I don't know how much...
but beyond the sub-region.
Sure. Even beyond the sub-region, because
right.
we still have inflow of, small arms and light weapons that are coming from Libya and other parts of the Sahel that are pouring into the country. So it's already internationalized. So the question we have to ask these opponents is, would you rather prefer the status quo, where 43 people were slaughtered to death and many more may still die if we do nothing? Doing nothing is not the answer. And continuing in the same course we are on is equally not the answer. The answer is that we need to change course. And if bringing in mercenaries, we turn the tide of this war, I think I'm all for it. What we want is, we want results. And the result is long-lasting peace in the Northeast. We've already spent a lot of treasure and blood in trying to combat this menace, and we're not seeing the end of it. So to me, if mercenary can bring peace, let's go for it.
But of course, on a political level, beyond the potential of the mercenaries to make a difference, bringing them in would represent a monumental indictment of the capacity of the armed forces of Africa's biggest economy and most populous country. That would rather be something of a shame, wouldn't it?
Well, you see, I wouldn't see that as a shame, because, like I said earlier, the end justifies the means. If we continue the course and the Nigerian military is unable to subdue Boko Haram, wouldn't that be shameful to the Nigerian military? It would be shameful to the Nigerian military. So wouldn't they rather have assistance that will help them to end the insurgency and equally gain the credit with even the mercenaries? Mercenary is not unique to Nigeria. We've just discussed about what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, particularly Iraq with the Black Waters. That's mercenary. So even the most sophisticated and most highly advanced and most powerful militaries in the world are hiring the services of private security practitioners, which is what we are calling mercenaries, right? So if they can do that, how much more a small military like that of Nigeria military? Like I told you earlier, Nigeria has less than 200,000 army personnel. Now compared to over 1.something million that of the United States army, yet they can hire the services of private security practitioners. So I don't see the shame in it.
Right. Do you think, though, that the fact that the president of Nigeria is himself a retired general, that rather makes the slap on the face a little more difficult?
Well, we've given the president 6 years to prove himself to Nigerians. And up to this time, he has not been able to do that.
Well, they'll argue that it's 5 years at the moment. It hasn't quite reached
well, 5 years, 6 years
with a few months to go.
It's same thing. 5 years, 6 years is the same thing. Okay, well, let me put it this way. We've given them 5 years, the president 5 years, to bring his experience as a former 2-star general and a former head of state to the barrow in the Northeast and end it. Up till now, he has not been able to do that. And so I don't see the pride and arrogance in trying to get assistance from those who can help you to solve your problems. If I can solve a problem by myself, I'm going to look elsewhere to where I can get solution to that problem. It's not a matter of pride or arrogance. What I'm saying, look, people's lives are at stake. The well-being of people are at stake. And when people's lives are at stake, like we have in the Northeast, it shouldn't be a matter of arrogance or pride. It's a matter of achieving results. And the result is a permanent peace in the Northeast, where the people can live normal life, and where Nigeria can reinvest the resources is spending right now in fighting that insurgency, to building infrastructure, creating jobs, and giving people access to education and growing its economy. That, to me, is more important than any arrogance or pride.
So if you were given charge now as a former U.S. captain, as someone who is in security, to be part of a team that assesses what's going on in the North and tries to do something, how quickly would you be able to act? Because I would imagine that you would need to gather intelligence before you act. That's going to take a bit of time. In the meantime, Boko Haram could be doing things, couldn't it?
Sure, that would take a bit of time, because we are not in government right now, because I don't have access to all the intelligence information that the president has access to right now. But as soon as those intelligence are made available to us, I don't think it should take that much time for someone to be able to make a decision that will lead us, in the right direction to ending this insurgency, because this thing has gone on for too long, and we can't allow it to continue to go on for that long. So what I'm saying is that we can bring a whole bunch of experience, both outside and within Nigeria, bring them together so we can sit down and properly analyze what is going on in the country right now, figure out the strategy and the tactics that we can deploy to end this insurgency. We are fighting this in haphazardly, and I say we are fighting this haphazardly because not quite often do you not see the Nigerian army talking about engaging in one operation or the other outside the Northeast in areas that are relatively peaceful. You see Nigerian army personnel, they are up there in the South, they're in the Southeast, they're in the Southwest. I don't think that any soldier should be manning any checkpoint in any other part of the country right now.
But part of the problem, though,
I think that they should all be in the Northeast.
Right, but part of the problem is that this insurgency has metamorphosed into banditry and criminality. So in other words, you've got people who have come out of the Northeast and, sundry sort of allied places and moved away from there and become, part of a ransom industry, for example, kidnapping people, robbing people, doing all kinds of things. So to some extent, that is a subset of the insurgency. You've got them in the Northwest now and so on. And that widens the area of operation of the army.
Correct. And that is a direct indictment on the strategy that is in play right now. Now, you understand that we didn't have this much banditry when Jonathan Goodluck was in office, when they were using those mercenaries. So the whole effort was confined in the Northeast and did not allow anybody to escape from there and spread. But because we didn't use that strategy and we didn't use that momentum, we allowed this thing to metamorphose.
Well, actually, the government would argue, the Buhari government would argue that it wasn't contained in the north because you were having attacks in Abuja and in different places across in Nigeria. I mean, there were threats to Lagos and all that sort of thing. They would argue that they've managed to push everything back to a small area in the northeast.
It was not them that managed to do that. I can argue that. Check when was the last time anywhere in Abuja was attacked. I don't disagree with you that there were attacks in Abuja and outside the Northeast. There were. But towards the twilight of that last administration, they were able to contain the whole thing in the Northeast. I've heard the information minister mention that. Check and see the last time there was attack in Abuja. It's not within that twilight of the last administration, because the last administration was able to end attacks in Abuja before handing over to this administration. So I beg to differ,
right.
I beg to disagree with them.
The other problem, of course, is that the Boko Haram itself, apart from the fact that it's split, which means that it doesn't have a unified focus, it's now got splinter groups.
Sure.
But it, ideologically, it's also kind of evolved away from what it used to be before, which makes the job of trying to get on top of them rather difficult, doesn't it? Because they're no longer a purely ideological, sort of Sharia-driven, you know, organization. They've now got splinter groups with their own sort of perspectives.
Sure. And if we don't take drastic measures to contain them now or dismantle them, their ideology will even spread even further. And that will even make it much more difficult for us to deal with in the long run. So that is why I am saying that, look, drastic situations require drastic measures. And if bringing in mercenaries and outside assistance will help us to bring permanent peace in the Northeast, we should not hesitate to take advantage of it. We should jettison self-pride and arrogance and do what is right so that we can give normalcy to the people of the Northeast.
But, I mean, all said and done, it is, of course, up to President Buhari and the leadership of the Nigerian armed forces to make that decision.
It's not even the...
Do you think they will accept the recommendation to bring in mercenaries?
Look, the buck stops on the desk of Mr. President.
Well, do you think the president would make that?
Well, that is the problem. That's the problem. If he's serious about solving the problem, I think he should explore that option.
Yeah, but knowing him like you do, I mean, obviously you don't sit around, you know, with him all day sort of thing, but knowing what you know of him, do you think it is probable or even possible that he would accept recommendations to bring in mercenaries?
Knowing him from a distance, understand that he was the one that ended the contract with those mercenaries that were brought in by former Jonathan. He ended it because he believed that the Nigerian military is capable of solving the problem. But it's obvious to him and most Nigerians that what we have right now in place, we can't solve that problem. So the most rational thing to do right now is to engage the services of those mercenaries. And I will appeal to Mr. President to listen to members of his own political party. Those who are calling for use of mercenaries are not members of the opposition parties, not PDP or some errant Nigerians that were doing that. These are members of his own political party.
I think the difference, though, is that when Jonathan brought in mercenaries, it wasn't being discussed publicly. They did it, and it was after they had done it that, I think it was Reuters or somebody, things started filtering out that mercenaries, South African mercenaries, former Soviet mercenaries, were being used in the Northeast.
Sure.
But they took 6 weeks and they restored some form of order, and then they held elections. It's different this time because the cat's out of the bag, isn't it?
Sure. What we're talking about is not shame. I have said it before that it would be more shameful to even President Muhammadu Buhari to have completed 8 years.
Okay, we've got about, sorry, finish what you're saying.
To have completed 8 years as the President and Commander-in-Chief and former military head of state, former 2-star general, for him to have completed 8 years, and we still have this problem in Nigeria.
We're almost out of time. What about the Nigerian populace in general and the long-suffering people of the Northeast in particular? Do you think they care who does it as long as Boko Haram ends up being flushed out?
Why not? It's to the benefit of everybody, particularly those in the Northeast. I know that most Northeasterners don't want to live on handout. They want to be able to go to their farms. They want to farm, they want to feed their families, they want to live normal life like everybody else. So whatever step that is being taken by the government to end the insurgency so that normalcy can return to their lives, I'm sure they can endorse it. I don't see anybody having any problems with it.
Okay, Captain Bish Johnson, absolutely enormous pleasure talking with you. Captain Bish, of course, a retired US Army officer and a current security analyst. Thank you very much indeed.